Thank you very much. Fabulous. So I'd like to start off as part of our Ditota presentation in Canada. We always acknowledge the Indigenous land on which we live, work, and play. Today, while we're not at home, I would like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples from where we came from. In our case, we are located in Western Canada in the Okanagan Valley. And specifically, our office is, or our area is on the unceded ancestral territory of the Syilx, the Nklakama, and the Secwepemc peoples. Next slide. Awesome. So where are we exactly? We are located in the southern interior of British Columbia, one of the provinces on the southwestern edge of Canada. The region is named for two major geographic features, the Thompson River and the Okanagan Lake, which you saw in the previous picture. This region has over 120 communities, including 33 Indigenous communities in an area approximately the size of Ireland. I'm very excited that Ireland is here because you have always been part of our presentations, just saying. So we are home to the tallest peak in the Canadian Rockies called Mount Robson in the north and to the semi-arid climate of the Okanagan Desert in the south. Next slide. And who are we? TOTA is a not-for-profit organization that operates social enterprise activities. We provide destination development, marketing, industry, and experience development, plus research services to approximately 2,500 stakeholders in our region. We look to improve industry practices, support their economic success and overall sustainability through tourism, marketing, awareness raising, and training programs. Next slide. And now I'll hand it over to Mike.
Thank you very much, Eve. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk a bit about our process of resident engagement. And for those of you who have heard a Thompson Okanagan presentation before, this might be a little bit repetitive. It's only because everything that we've done fundamentally from the start has been part of resident engagement. We're continuously integrating the view of the residents, and resident engagement is not separate process from tourism development. So you can move on to the next slide. So when we started this journey back in 2012, and I've said this before, we became INSTO members in 2019, but we started our destination development strategy back in 2012. And that was a process that really involved stakeholders, but it also involved residents. So we built everything that we've done off of what residents wanted from the beginning. We did numerous engagements throughout the region as we developed this strategy. And part of that was having open houses for stakeholders and for residents to learn about what they wanted out of tourism. So just to kind of give you a sense of how it worked from the very beginning of developing our strategy was this component of asking our residents what they thought tourism should look like into the future. You can go on to the next slide. From that point forward, we built off of our regional strategy. However, we then dove down into sub-regional strategies. So our region is built up of 7 sub-regional strategies. We worked with our provincial entity, Destination British Columbia, to create these corridor strategies. And each one of these strategies has a working committee. Those working committees we meet on a quarterly basis. You know, that's the goal. We don't always meet on a quarterly basis, but definitely several times per year. And those working committees, we look at the sub-regional strategies and figure out what the next destination development procedure will be. Those working committees are made up of many different components of the resident experience, or like residents within our sub-regions. An example of that would be local community groups, local community DMOs, government officials, and they're all represented by residents. When we look at these different community groups, they're all led by people that live in the region. Local CDMOs, as we call them, community development organizations, they're all represented by local residents. And then also the government officials that represent, they are there at the working committee level, and they're the officials that represent their population being voted in members of our destination. So at every level of our working committees, we incorporate some elements of resident participation. You can go on to the next slide. Another component of what we do is we're very responsive to community needs. We react to what the industry and what our community needs to react to. One really good example of that was this summer. Every single summer we deal with wildfires, but some summers are worse than others. This past summer, numerous larger communities were threatened by large wildfires, and therefore our residents and our businesses were affected by that. What we then did was we spoke to the provincial ministry. We spoke to local MLAs, which is our representatives of government, and we created a kind of next week roundtable to invite we hosted an in-person roundtable that was invite only for businesses, stakeholders, and some residents, keeping in mind that businesses are all owned by residents in our region. It's very mom and pop, as we like to call it, destination. And we're able to address their questions. What are we going to do? How are we going to address these emergencies? So a big part of what we do from that component is we are responsive to community needs as they arise. What came out of that was we were able to take all that information, put it into a report, and then give it back to our government officials to hopefully act. We asked for some things out of these meetings, and we were able to get some action from them as well. So you can move on to the next slide. Oh yeah, okay. Well, kind of, but go ahead.
You can have the last word, Mike. It's
Fair enough.
all right. So engaging Indigenous communities. So you heard me mention we have 33 Indigenous communities. Since 2015, we've been partnering with Indigenous Tourism British Columbia, or ITBC, as you heard Dirk mention earlier, building relationships and foundations based on Indigenous principles. Together, we provide personalized support and mentorship to ensure Indigenous tourism growth as led by Indigenous communities. We have 2 Indigenous tourism specialists that connect with communities and learn their priorities for tourism development and can guide businesses through marketing, training, and the development of authentic cultural tourism experiences. This is all Indigenous led. We can't go in to Indigenous communities and say, okay, give us this great experience. It's not the way it works. Programs focus on leveraging tourism for cultural revival, intercultural awareness, economic growth, of course, knowing that this serves as a platform to educate both local and international guests through traditional cultural teachings and experiences. A significant emphasis on Indigenous training is currently underway, supported by a recent $6 million funding announcement from the British Columbia government. Next slide. All right, so resident sentiment. As a component of engaging residents around tourism, TOTA has partnered with Happiness Alliance to conduct a robust resident survey using the Happiness Index survey tool. This tool asks residents to answer over 60 questions on health and well-being and their satisfaction with tourism. And yes, we do get people answering it. The resulting data for a subset of these questions are available on the Tourism Impact Portal, which you may have heard us speaking to before. And a screenshot of this tool will be shown in the next slide. DBC, Destination British Columbia, is a provincial crown corp that leads the marketing of British Columbia as a tourism destination and promotes the development and growth of the provincial tourism industry. They've conducted a province-wide resident satisfaction survey that asks residents about their experience with tourism in their own community. The aggregated data from this new tool will be available to our regional destination management organizations like TOTA across the province, hopefully next year. Next slide. So this graphic, although you can't read it, is a screenshot from the Tourism Impact Portal, which is publicly available. It's showing a summary of the community well-being survey metrics that relate to residents' quality of life, such as how satisfied residents are with their sense of belonging, access to recreation, access to cultural activities, perception of the health of the environment, and personal safety. Next slide. Yeah, absolutely. Well, the next one's a wrap up.
Yeah, so a couple things to take away from this. As mentioned, when we do our destination development planning, when we do these surveys, this is all integrated into the actions that we do and the work that we do. So as we move forward, as we look at what projects we want to work on, we take the residents' perceptions and their views on how we're going to move forward. We've been doing that for several years. We certainly can get better at it. It's good to understand these sentiments and understand that your population does encourage tourism for the most part. but also understanding the areas of weakness as well. And they relate really highly to the INSTO network. You know, within our region, drought is an area of concern, and certainly residents are aware of that and the impact that tourism has on that. So through these different processes, we're able to get that feedback from our residents, and we're able to incorporate it into what we do at a regional level, at a community level, but also when we report back to INSTO as well. And one other thing I want to mention is Thompson, Okanagan is part of British Columbia. What we've seen over the last 5 years or so is everything that we're doing is happening at a BC wide level. Not necessarily us starting it, but BC as a whole now really have come together to create this sustainable tourism network. And so, you know, in the future, we hope that other BC destinations become part of this, but it's really encouraging to see that what's happening is happening now at a provincial level, which means that our government, from a ministry standpoint, from an official standpoint, are putting it into their policies, and they create frameworks that mean that, you know, policy-wise, these things need to happen. So it's really encouraging. We would love to see that happen nationally, and those conversations are happening. It's easier for Canada in some parts because we have a smaller population, although we do have a very large geographical area, but there are also challenges as well. So you can go to the next slide. Thank you very much. And if you certainly want to connect with us, please connect with us. There you go.